So today I wanted to talk about a interesting topic, which is shame. And it came up for me recently because I was feeling some anxiety about something. And it was like no matter how I was looking at this situation, I I wasn't able to sort of calm down the part of me that was feeling anxious. And at a certain point, I noticed um, that I wasn't making it okay for me to feel that. And so I started getting curious about, why was this other part of me not feeling okay about feeling anxious? And immediately I had this, you shouldn't be experiencing this, or you should be able to handle this easily. And I realized that I had shame around this idea of experiencing this emotion and not being able to dispatch with it quickly. And so then I thought, oh, well, let me just experience this shame for a moment. And I, I'll experience shame from time to time. And what I realized is, at least for me, shame comes in three flavors, probably more. Um, but one flavor of shame is uh, that I feel I shouldn't be experiencing something because some external authority is saying that it's not okay. And so that's the first type. And the second type is also an external authority saying that I shouldn't be experiencing that. So they're shaming me, or they're shaming you, or a person. And the difference between those two, they sound the same, but um, the first one might be that I'm being shamed by somebody external, but down deep, I may not agree with them in some way, or I don't like that authority, or our values don't match. And that's actually an easier type of shame, because at least part of me internally can say, hey, screw you. You can shame me, but I don't agree with it. Or I don't agree with it completely. But the type of shame, if you're getting shamed by somebody who you respect and have good regard for, that's even worse. For me, that brings up more shame and guilt about disappointing somebody who I respect, or hold in high regard. So that's the second type of shame, and that's really tricky to handle. And then the third type of shame, for me, is when I'm feeling shame, when I feel that something is not okay. And that's also quite tricky. And I find when there's this experience of self-shame, like it's not okay for me to be afraid. It's not okay for me to, whatever you're ashamed about, be afraid, be anxious. I think it's useful to distinguish, even though it feels like you're saying, part of you is saying it's not okay. Sometimes that feeling is something that we've internalized from one of those other two. Either we've internalized it from somebody that we don't respect, or we've internalized it from somebody we do respect. And for me, even just noticing and really distinguishing the shame, I find to be very therapeutic. Just to notice that it's there, not necessarily try to change it, but to notice it. Okay, I'm feeling shame about this, and is that something that I want to keep experiencing, or can I begin to have some compassion or empathy for myself, and just realize, I'm human. I have experiences. I have different emotions, and that's okay. So I think first distinguishing, I'm feeling shame. In this case, I noticed it because I noticed that part of me was not okay with what I was experiencing. When I was younger, I noticed that there were a lot of times when I had this experience of not being comfortable in my own skin. And, that I just felt a little bit out of place or incongruent. And I think a lot of that came from different types of shame, or not liking a certain part of myself. And it's perfectly natural to like certain parts of ourselves and not like other parts of ourselves. But I think distinguishing when you have shame about something is really, really useful. And it's a first step in coming to acceptance, and perhaps coming to appreciation for all that you are and all that you've done, and the struggles that we all have as humans. I think something to notice with shame also is shame relates to a standard or to an expectation. And I've done a couple talks about holding expectations. Shame is another, it's that you're saying that someone or something isn't good because they haven't lived up to a certain standard. And so when it comes to self-shame, or shame from somebody that you love, or shame from somebody that you may not even respect, I think it's good to get a little bit curious about, where did that standard come from? And do I really agree with that standard? And is it an all or nothing? Or, like all humans, are we evolving? Are we striving to improve? So that perhaps the verdict of judgment isn't an all or nothing. And it's like, who made these people the judge and jury of your experience? And is that something that you want to continue to live with? Perhaps instead of having just one person judging you, maybe having a panel, right? Like we have juries so that we have a diversity of perspectives. And when it comes to these sort of internal critics, I think it's really, really good to check who you've accepted onto your panel of inner critics, and to balance it out and make it a good, balanced jury. Maybe add some people there that, there may be other people that you love that don't have that shame. Another thing to notice is, very often people who are giving out shame have experienced that on their own, and they're just continuing a tradition of shame. Perhaps they were shamed by their parents, or by their teachers, and so they internalize that, and they're doing the same. They're offering the same gift to you, and perhaps they think, okay, I'm preparing you for the world. But very often, it's, like I said, it's an internalized, can be a tradition of shame. Certain cultures have years of internalized shame, and very often there's shame around. One of my teachers pointed out, there's usually shame around sexuality, and there's usually shame around religious ideas. So, and spirituality, or spirituality that goes outside of the borders of whatever religion that culture has as their primary religion. So it's kind of interesting that these are things that culture has sort of chosen, like, okay, we need to create guidelines around this, and therefore the way to create the guideline very often is through shame. That's one of the mechanisms of keeping something in place. So let me recap a little bit. How I got here was I noticed that I was having an emotion, and part of me was making it wrong. Part of me was experiencing shame about that. And then I just got curious about, okay, is it external? If it is external, what type of external shame is it, or is it internal? And then getting curious about, okay, are these standards that I really want to hold and that I agree with or not? And also just noticing if it is an external shame, maybe a school teacher shamed you. Getting curious, like, was that person shamed also? Was that where they learned that? Or were they just, is it something they internalized from their parents or teachers or from culture in general? So, and as I begin to look through all these different things, for me, it offers a little relief, and it offers some choice, that I may decide, hey, you know what? That isn't one of my standards. I'm going to be okay with whatever I'm experiencing and give myself some space to have that experience. And realize that all experience just moves through you. So hope that's helpful, and love to hear how it is.